There are moments in life when silence feels like an ocean. When you stand in the middle of your journey and everything that once surrounded you fades. The noise, the voices, the company, the laughter. The crowd that once walked with you suddenly disappears, and you realize that God has invited you into a sacred classroom called solitude. It is not punishment. It is preparation. It is the divine whisper saying, "Come away, that I may speak to you." Oh, to hear God is not a gift given to the busy. It is a revelation reserved for the still. He does not shout over the storm. He waits for you to silence it. When life becomes loud, his voice feels distant, not because he has stopped speaking, but because we have stopped listening. The world teaches you to keep moving, to keep scrolling, to keep speaking. But heaven teaches you to stop, to wait, to be still. For it is only in stillness that the whisper of eternity can reach the chambers of your soul. There will come a season when God separates you from noise, from familiarity, from distraction. You will not understand it at first. You will ask, "Lord, why does it feel like I've lost everything?" But heaven will whisper, "Because I'm trying to give you something greater, myself." Hearing God is not about doing more. It is about being less hurried, less crowded, less dependent on the outer world. When you walk alone, the silence around you can feel uncomfortable at first. But that silence is holy. It is the womb of revelation. Every prophet, every servant, every friend of God was trained there, in the quiet, in the waiting, in the hidden. Moses heard God not in Egypt's palace, but on the backside of the desert. Elijah did not hear him in the wind or the earthquake, but in the still small voice. Even Jesus withdrew to lonely places, not because he was lonely, but because he was listening. To hear God when you are walking alone, you must first learn to unclutter your soul. Every distraction, every opinion, every unnecessary voice must be laid aside like heavy garments. Because divine whispers cannot compete with human noise. God will not compete for your attention. He waits, patiently, tenderly, for you to quiet the world, so you can recognize his voice that has been there all along. Sometimes he will remove people not because they are wrong, but because they are loud. He will close doors not because he is cruel, but because he is clearing the hallway for his footsteps. The quieter your environment becomes, the clearer your spirit becomes. That is where you begin to notice the rhythm of heaven, the small nudges, the inner peace, the stillness that confirms. Hearing God is not always about words. Sometimes it's about awareness. His voice is often more like presence than speech. It's the peace that fills a room when you pray. It's the conviction that tightens your heart when you drift from truth. It's the sudden idea that feels like wisdom beyond your own. God speaks through peace, through timing, through alignment. But to discern him, you must walk closely. You cannot hear the whisper of someone you stand far from. God's whisper is intimate because his voice was never meant to be heard from a distance. It is the sound that fills the space between a trusting heart and a listening ear. There will be nights when you cry and hear nothing. Days when you pray and the heavens feel like brass. You will say, "God, where are you?" And the silence will echo back. But silence is not his absence. It is his strategy. He is training your spirit to recognize his voice beyond emotion. For those who only hear God through feeling will lose him when feelings fade. But those who learn to hear him through faith will walk with him even in the dark. When you walk alone, God is teaching you dependence. He is stripping away every other source so that you can discover that his whisper is enough. He wants to be your direction, your counselor, your comfort. He will not compete with noise because his goal is not to impress you. It is to transform you. There is a reason he hides his voice in silence, because silence purifies your motives. It tests whether you seek his presence, just his answers. Many come to God with questions. Few come simply to listen. But when you learn to wait in stillness without demanding words, you begin to hear his heart. The voice of God is not always a sentence. Sometimes it's a stirring. Sometimes it's not a word you hear, but a knowing you cannot explain. It's when peace replaces panic without reason. It's when conviction burns in your chest until you change. It's when you suddenly understand something you've never studied. His voice is living. It breathes into your thoughts. It moves through your conscience. It dances in your spirit. To hear God, you must also unclog the wells of your heart. Many cannot hear him because their spirit is crowded with bitterness, fear, or constant noise. The pure in heart, Jesus said, shall see God. And the pure in heart shall hear him too. Purity is the amplifier of his voice. When your motives are clean, when your desires are aligned with his will, his whisper becomes unmistakable. You will not always hear him in thunder. Sometimes it will be a nudge. Wait. Sometimes a breath. Trust. Sometimes a pause that saves you from disaster. The closer you get to God, the less you will need explanations. You will simply know. His peace becomes your compass. His stillness becomes your confirmation. When you are walking alone, your emotions will tempt you to doubt. The enemy will whisper lies in the silence. God has left you. But do not believe it. The silence is proof that he is near, for only those he walks beside are called to stillness. The crowd shouts, the companion whispers. The fact that God is quiet does not mean he is distant. It means he is drawing you into deeper communion. There will be days when hearing God requires faith more than feeling. When your prayers return unanswered, stay. When your worship feels dry, stay. When your heart aches and heaven is silent, stay. Because God's greatest revelations are born out of persistence. The secret of hearing God is not perfection, it's consistency. He reveals himself to those who keep showing up. Every morning you rise and choose stillness. You are tuning your soul to heaven's frequency. Every time you turn off the world to listen, you are training your spirit to recognize his voice. You may not hear thunder from the sky, but you will notice transformation inside you. You will find peace where there was anxiety. You will feel conviction where there was confusion. You will walk with assurance where you once doubted. The more you listen, the clearer it becomes. The clearer it becomes, the more you obey. The more you obey, the deeper he speaks. Hearing God is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong conversation. He speaks to those who steward his whispers with obedience. When he tells you to forgive and you obey, the voice grows louder. When he nudges you to wait and you trust, the whisper deepens. When he calls you to surrender and you do, the intimacy expands. To hear God when you are walking alone, you must also learn the discipline of stillness. Stillness is not idleness, it is confidence in motion. It is saying, I don't have to move fast because I know God moves before me. The world runs to prove its strength, but those who know their God can walk slowly and still arrive on time, because divine timing never rushes the faithful. Sometimes hearing God will mean hearing nothing for a while. That silence will teach you what sermons cannot. It will humble you. It will stretch you. It will expose your fears and strip your pride. It will make you say, Lord, even if you don't speak, I'll still follow. And in that surrender, you will begin to hear again. Not with your ears, but with your heart. Every saint who has ever truly heard God has first walked through silence. Silence is not empty. It is full of training. It teaches you to distinguish between the noise of your thoughts and the melody of his spirit. The voice of God never rushes, never panics, never condemns. It comes as a steady light, convicting, yes, but never crushing, guiding, but never manipulating. When you are walking alone and want to hear God, look around you. He speaks through creation. The sunrise is his reminder that mercy renews. The wind is his breath. The still lake mirrors his peace. The night sky reveals his infinity. The whisper of God fills the ordinary for those who walk slowly enough to notice. God speaks through his word, through people, through promptings, through peace. But when you are alone, he often speaks through awareness. You will find that what once felt silent now feels sacred. The pause between your prayers becomes communion. The quiet hours of the night become conversation. To hear God, you must slow down enough to sense him in what others overlook. His voice may not change your surroundings, but it will change how you see them. The noise of life will tell you that silence is unproductive, but heaven knows that silence is the seedbed of revelation. When you begin to hear God, everything changes. Not because your circumstances are different, but because your perspective is transformed. You no longer ask, why is this happening? But what are you teaching me? You stop seeking escape and start seeking encounter. You realize that the wilderness is not a curse. It is an invitation. There is a moment when his whisper becomes so real that it quiets every storm. When his peace becomes your navigation system. You start walking through life differently, calmer, lighter, anchored. Because you are no longer guessing, you are guided. And that guidance doesn't always come in dramatic ways. Sometimes it's a sudden stillness before a wrong decision. Sometimes it's a divine discomfort when your path drifts. Sometimes it's joy rising like a signal when you are in alignment. Hearing God is not about trying harder, it's about trusting deeper. It's realizing that his voice is not rare. Your attention is. He has always been speaking. Through the sunrise, through scripture, through the tug in your conscience, through the rhythm of your heart. But until you quiet your world, you won't hear what heaven has been saying all along. So if you are walking alone right now, if it feels like the crowd has left, the friends have faded, the plans have stopped, don't rush to fill the silence. Stay there. For that silence is holy ground. It is where God shapes prophets. It is where he births clarity. It is where you stop hearing the world and start hearing eternity. You will come to a place where you no longer fear being alone, because alone is where you find your greatest companionship. The solitude that once scared you becomes your sanctuary. You will start to crave that quiet, because that's where your spirit feels alive. You will wake up and say, Lord, speak, your servant is listening. And he will, not always in words, but in ways that change everything. In the middle of stillness, you will feel peace invade your mind. You will sense direction rise in your heart. You will notice divine coincidences that are not coincidences at all. And you will know, the same God who spoke the world into being is now whispering to your soul. The walk may be lonely, but it is never empty. Every step you take in faith tunes your heart closer to his frequency. Every time you choose silence over noise, surrender over control, prayer over panic, you are teaching your soul to hear the unspoken language of heaven. The day will come when you look back and realize that what once felt like isolation was actually initiation. The beginning of intimacy with God. You will see that the long nights of silence were classrooms of faith. You will understand that his whisper was always there, waiting for your stillness. So do not fear solitude. Do not run from the quiet, for it is in the quiet that God speaks the loudest. And when you finally hear him, not with your ears, but with your spirit, you will realize that every lonely road was leading you to this moment of communion. When you learn to hear God while walking alone, you are never truly alone again. You become a companion of the divine. You begin to live guided, guarded, and grounded by his presence. You wake with assurance, walk with peace, and rest with confidence. Because hearing God is not about mastering a method. It's about cultivating a relationship. It's about walking so closely with him that silence becomes conversation and stillness becomes worship. It's about knowing that even when life is uncertain, his whisper is steady. So walk on, slowly, quietly, faithfully. Don't rush the silence. Don't fight the solitude. Let it shape you, stretch you, and sanctify you. For the God who speaks in stillness will soon speak through you. And when you hear him, truly hear him, you will never mistake another voice for his again. And that, my friend, is the beauty of walking alone with God. The solitude that once felt empty becomes the place where heaven speaks. The silence that once frightened you becomes the sound of his whisper. And the loneliness that once broke you becomes the space where love himself draws near.